Book TV recently visited Capitol Hill to ask members of Congress what they're reading this summer.
Well, reading is such an exciting thing. I read about 100 books a year, and I've done a book report on every one of them since I got out of graduate school. And it makes a nice reference for going back and finding some other reading occasionally. One of the things I'm doing now is rereading some of the mystery books that I have read before. There's a Wyoming author named C.J. Box that writes some phenomenal stuff about Joe Pickett, who's a game warden in Wyoming, who winds up solving some outstanding mysteries as well as acquainting people with Wyoming and some of the special things there. I get advanced copies of his book usually. This one's Free Fire, which is about Yellowstone Park. And on that one, I actually got to be involved before he wrote the book, because there was a zone in Wyoming, in Yellowstone Park, that was actually considered to be part of Idaho, but nobody lived there. So there would be no jury of your peers. And consequently, maybe you could commit murder there. And so he asked me to make sure that wouldn't be a possibility before the book came out, and encouraged people to kill people in the part of Idaho that's Yellowstone Park. Fascinating person. Another Wyoming author that I'm rereading is Craig Johnson, who does the Longmire Sheriff series, which is on television too. But the television ones are not the same as the books, so I encourage everybody to read the books. Another phenomenal character study writer. I do a little international reading. I've been to Botswana to work on the AIDS problem. I helped write the PEPFAR bill, and President Bush surprised us and said, I'm going to put $15 billion into solving the AIDS problem. That got our attention, and I got to help write the bill. And then after we wrote the bill, they sent me over to see what the problem was. That's how we do things. But Botswana is one of the places I went to, and there's a series of books called the #1 Ladies Detective Agency that's great on bringing out the culture of a lot of Africa, but particularly Botswana. I carry books with me all the time. That's why I have these. Everybody has to have their cell phone with them. It's real easy to have some apps on there. There's a Kindle app. And on that one right now, I'm reading My 60 Years on the Plains. And that's about a guy that was a trader, a trapper, and an Indian fighter. And his diary has been written into a book which didn't come out very long ago. And fascinating stuff about the West. And I carry a Kindle with me. It'll fit in my pocket real easily. And it's a little easier to read outdoors because it doesn't have the color depth that the other does. And on this one, I'm reading Girl on the Train right now. Really a strangely written book, a totally different style of writing. And some people would consider it a chick novel. But I saw that it was in the top 10 reading list, so I thought, well, I better read that one too. And I have. And, well, I haven't finished it yet. I'm about a third of the way through it. I also read some technical books that have to do with my job. Now, one of the reasons I read several books at a time is you can get kind of tired reading one book, one style, so you switch around and it keeps the interest going, particularly if they're textbook types. And one of them that I've been working is Dead Men Ruling. That fits in with my budget work, because this is about the people that wrote the Budget Act, who are all either dead or former senators. And there's some problems. I'm trying to redo the Budget Act right now. And there's a lot of help in that. There's another excellent book that I'm going through. Oh, when I read a technical book, I actually try to get the gist from the introduction, and then I try to switch to the last chapter to see if they've actually got any good suggestions. And if they do, then I read the part in between to see how they got to that point. And I highly suggest that for any of the technical reading. You can tell between the first chapter and the last chapter whether the middle part of the book is going to be worth reading. I also dog-ear books. If you loan me a book, you don't want to loan me a book. I dog-ear the books and I write in the margins as I come up with ideas. That's again something I learned in graduate school from a guy that was teaching complex enterprise, which really shouldn't have a lot of reading, but he gave us a reading list of books that didn't have anything to do with business, and had us write down the ideas that we got as we did that. The Lost Science of Money is another one that I'm reading right now. It's a very thick book that takes a little different approach to the Federal Reserve than some of the ones that are anti-Federal Reserve or some of the ones that are pro-Federal Reserve. This one goes more into the history of money, and actually has some good suggestions in the last chapter. I'm trying to fill in the piece in between right now. Another part of my reading, every night when I finish up, I've got to get my mind off of what I've been doing. If I keep talking budget or working health or working education or working pensions or small business or whatever committee I'm really focused on that evening, if I go to sleep, I keep working on it unless I read something different. And that's when I read some of the novels, but I always finish up by reading some books that have some religious background. Right after 9/11, I got a copy of the Quran, a translation of the Quran. I can't read Arabic, and started reading that, and I had to go see the chaplain because I said, that's really a bloody book, and really concerned me. And he said, well, you need to go back and read the Old Testament. The difference, of course, between the Quran and the Bible with the New Testament is the New Testament's teachings of Jesus, which are recognized by the other great religions and much more peaceful. But so I'm reading another translation of the Quran now that was given to me by a Muslim who said that you'll find this to be a less violent version. It might be, but there's still a lot of violence in it, and whether you believe or you don't believe. I'm reading a biography of Billy Graham also, and I particularly like the chronological Bible. The different books of the Bible were written at different times, and even some pieces of them were written at different times. And somebody took and compiled it so that it flows straight through, and you find out they weren't sent into Babylon 6 different times. It was a punishment primarily once. And when you get to the gospel, it's probably a little bit shorter in the gospel because there's some repetition in there, and they don't repeat the same verse 4 times because it was in the 4 gospels. So that's a pretty good way to read the Bible. And I was also challenged once to read the Bible over a short period of time. I was suggested to read it over 3 months. And my son and I both took the challenge and did it. And you can do it with any Bible. You just look at the number of pages that it's got, and you divide it by the number of days in those 3 months. And then you read that many pages each day. And the advantage of doing that is you're looking at the big picture then instead of the individual verses, which we sometimes get hung up on. So that's a little bit of what I'm reading and what I'm doing with my summer. I make a plane trip to Wyoming pretty much every weekend. And of course you have to come back again then to vote. And that's a 3-book trip. So I can get quite a bit done there besides the studying that I have to do on the plane.
Book TV wants to know what you're reading this summer. Tweet us your answer at BookTV, or you can post it on our Facebook page, facebook.com/BookTV.